Hey everyone. Here everybody comes. It is great to see you all today. Welcome. Welcome, welcome. Anybody have anything fun to share? Did you do anything over the weekend? I know it's Tuesday, but we're close enough to the weekend, right? All right. If not, anybody have any questions for me? Things about what you're learning or all right. If not, let's go ahead and begin. So I'm going to mute those of you who are not muted, just so we don't hear background noise. You can always turn it back on if you have a question for me. Let's see here. There we go. There we go. All right. Let me go ahead and share my screen with you. Takes a minute for that to work. There we go. All right. Terrific. So, before we study any subject, we have to learn a little bit of the background of it. And sometimes that can be like you just want to get to the meat of the subject. And we had to learn about things like how animals behave and what their life cycles are and classifying animals and all that. We have to learn about all that before we can start learning about animals themselves. But finally, we're there. This week, we start learning about actual animals. We start at the beginning or the end of the book, and then we'll work our way backwards as we go on. So we're going to spend 3 weeks learning about invertebrates. Can you guys all see that where it says Introduction to Invertebrates? Good, wonderful, wonderful. So before we do, I have a couple reminders that I want to tell you about. So then we'll get into talking about invertebrates. But I like that little cartoon there. This whole secret handshake thing was your idea. Yeah, imagine that. All right. First of all, you guys, those of you who live in different time zones other than the East Coast, you're probably already aware of this, but I just want to remind you all that AIM Academy is set for Eastern time. We don't have any way in Canvas to set it for different time zones. So for those of you who live in different time zones, your due date, or rather due time, is going to be different. So if you live, say, in California, your due date is actually going to be 9 p.m. California time, which is the same as midnight in the Eastern time zone. And there just isn't any way that we can change that. However, I post your assignments 2 weeks before the due date, at least, usually closer to 3. I think that gives you plenty of time. I don't think that 3 hours is going to be a major issue. I just make sure that you plan to submit your assignments before that on the due date in order to get that 1/4 extra credit point at the end. So remember, I don't ever take off points for things that are submitted after the due date. So it's fine if you're a few hours late or even a few days late, it's no problem. But if you want to get that extra credit point, you have to make sure that you turn it in by midnight of the due date on Eastern time. All right. Okay, so I want you guys to just ignore that plagiarism check. You've been getting a report when you submit a written assignment like the tests. If you've done that test yet, then you've gotten that report. I think that I've been successful at removing plagiarism check. We have a lot of bugs with it. It's a new program this year, and we're working things out. So I probably will be putting it back in later to help you, but for now, if it comes up, just ignore it. And then the third thing I want to point out is please number your exam answers. So when you have to write out the answers to an exam, like say it's got 7 questions on a test or an exam, please number your answers. So if my question number 3, asks you about the different kinds of skeletons that animals have, make sure your answer is labeled number 3. It's just too hard for me if you don't put numbers at all or if your numbers are not right. So it's really hard to grade. So I'm asking you to please number all of your exam answers. All right. Anybody have any questions about that? All right. Terrific. I have some jokes for you about this one. Why wouldn't the butterfly go to the dance? Because it was a mothball. It was a mothball. All right. Here's one I don't have a picture for, but how did the octopus cross the road to get to the other tide? To get to the other tide. How about this one? Why don't oysters share their pearls?
Because they're shellfish.
Very good. Because they're shellfish. What? They are shellfish. Isn't that beautiful, though? I love that picture there. There was a man eating at a restaurant, a seafood restaurant in my area recently, and he opened up his oyster and he found this very rare and very expensive kind of pearl inside the oyster. Wouldn't that be an amazing thing to find when you were eating at a restaurant? All right. How about this one? How do oysters call their friends? On their shell phones. How do shellfish get to the hospital? In a clambulance. And when did the fly fly? When the spider. Finally, why was the ant so confused? Because all his uncles were ants. Ha ha ha. All right. So Jaslyn, I'm seeing your comment there. Yeah, for somebody who's way far away from Eastern time zone, that's going to be a challenge, isn't it? My recommendation is just simply do it the day before. Consider it the whole day before. I'm sure you guys have gotten very good at getting the reminders from me that say, our meeting is at 11 a.m. Eastern time. You probably are pretty good at making that switch and saying, okay, that means 9 a.m. or 10 a.m. or whatever time for me. So just keep up the good work. Clearly, you're all making it here. So good work. All right. I want to talk a little bit about that smiling experiment that you guys did. Most of you finished it, and most of you found that people were more likely to smile at you if you smiled at them first. Isn't that interesting? So let's talk about, we learned about hypothesis a couple weeks ago. What was your hypothesis going into that lab that you did? What was remember, we do a hypothesis in if then format. If something is done, then something will happen. If, so what did you do? What was the experiment? Evie.
If you smile, someone smiles back.
Excellent. If I smile at someone, then they will smile back. That's our if then. That tells us what we're going to do. We're going to smile at someone. It tells us what we're going to look for. We're going to look for them to smile back. Excellent. So that's our hypothesis. Now, the thing with people, it's really hard to do controlled experiments with people where you only change one variable because there are a lot of variables. Remember what a variable is. A variable is something that can be a part of an experiment. It can have an effect on the experiment. Now, what are some of the variables that might have played a role in this one? Let's suppose that you found that nobody smiled at you when you smiled at them. What could possibly be some of the variables that caused that? Abigail.
A bad day.
Yeah, maybe somebody was just having a really bad day. Maybe they just got bad news, or they got a bad grade on a test, or something happened that made them sad. And so just seeing somebody else smile wasn't enough. So that's definitely a possibility. Maybe they didn't have a good breakfast that morning and they were just a little bit grumpy. Maybe they were very distracted. 4 people I smiled at just ignored me. Yeah, that happens sometimes. I'm going to go to Walmart with the goal of making someone smile. Well, Bastian, I think that's a good there's a good lesson in there for us, isn't it? We can have an impact on other people when we are cheerful, when we smile at them. Sometimes just smiling at someone is enough to brighten up their day. So maybe we should think about that sometimes. All right, back to invertebrates. Now that we've got the basics down and we're ready to start about animals, we're going to start with invertebrates. So what do we mean by invertebrates? What does that word mean? Madison.
No backbone.
Oh,
Yeah, no backbone.
Yeah, we have a big enough class, Bastion, that you have to raise your hand. Yeah, Bastion was in a
Sorry, I forgot.
class of mine once, and that wasn't needed. But yes, an animal
Sorry, I forgot.
without. That's okay, no problem. I understand. It is an animal without a backbone. Sometimes we say without a spine or without vertebrae. So it is just an animal that doesn't have a backbone. So in order to understand what that even means, we have to know what an animal is. So we've got a good definition that we use. I'm going to read the definition and then we'll talk about the individual parts of it. An animal is a living organism that feeds on organic matter, typically having specialized sense organs and nervous system and able to respond rapidly to stimuli. Okay, so what does it mean to feed on organic matter? Abigail. Yeah, eat. It means that we eat. We eat other living things. We eat things that are made of carbon. So when we use the word organic in science, it means made of carbon. In ordinary life, like when you go to the grocery store and you see a sign that says organic, that means grown without chemicals. But in science, the word organic means that it has carbon in it. It is a carbon-based life form, in other words. So plants and animals are organic matter. So an animal is a living organism that eats other living things, right? Or things that were living things. All right, the next thing is typically having specialized sense organs. What does that mean? What is a specialized sense organ? Abigail.
They can like sense their surroundings.
I'm having trouble hearing you, Abigail.
They can sense their surroundings.
They can sense their surroundings, but what are the organs that allow them to do that? I'm going to ask you guys to hold all of your comments in the chat box. It's going a little too fast for me and I'll miss questions. So please only type in either a question or a comment that has to do with what we're learning about here. Okay, great. Miles.
Ears and noses.
Yeah, excellent, excellent. So you have special organs inside your ears that let you hear, inside your nose that help you smell, inside your eyes that help you see, inside your tongue that help you taste, and then all over your skin to help you feel things. Those are your specialized sense organs. So an animal is going to have those. Now, a lot of animals have those things concentrated in one area. Like we've got most of our sense organs in our head. A lot of animals have most of their sense organs in their head. Some of them have them spread throughout, or some of them are not going to have all of them. There are some animals that don't have sense organs to be able to see, but they're going to have some sense organisms. All right. Now, where is a nervous system? So the nervous system is something that we find. Where's a person's nervous system? But know what we mean by nervous system? So basically, a nervous system is everywhere, is all over the place. So we've got a lot of concentration here in the brain, and we have a lot of concentration here in the spinal cord. But then we've got also these nerves that go out to all the different parts of the body. That's where a human's nervous system is located. Now, a dog, although it also has it has nerves that go to all the rest of the body, its nervous system would be on the top part because, you know, of the way they walk. Where we walk upright, a dog walks that way. Think about a grasshopper. Do you think a grasshopper has a nervous system? What do you think? Yes or no? Yeah, a grasshopper is an animal, so it has to have a nervous system. Right here, you can see the nervous system right in this area here is the nervous system of the grasshopper. What about a jellyfish? Do you think a jellyfish has a nervous system? Hold on just a second. Yes, it does. It does have a nervous system. So you can see in red right there, that is the nervous system of the jellyfish. Now, all of these animals fit all the parts of the definition, so they're all considered animals. all of these are, they all have all of those characteristics that we talked about. They all eat organic matter. They have specialized sense organs. They have a nervous system, and they all rapidly respond to stimuli. When they're touched, they move or they react in some kind of way. So that is what makes an animal an animal. Now, remember, of course, that animals are composed of these tiny little structures. What are the smallest structures of life? Everything is made of these. Every living thing is made of these. Yep, you got it, Bastian. Cells. So animals are composed of cells. Here's an example. This is what a bone cell is going to look like. Okay, I see the answer, atom, right there. Yes, but remember that atoms by themselves are not living things. So when we say the smallest thing that makes a living thing, the smallest living component, that would be a cell. Now, of course, cells are made of molecules and molecules are made of atoms. So if we go down far enough, we get to atom. But for this point, when we're talking about living things, the smallest unit of life is a cell. Now, atoms make up cells. You're right. Yep. So what do we call a similar group of cells that performs a function? So if we put a bunch of bone cells together, what do we get? Bone. You ever remember this hierarchy of living things? A bunch of skin cells make up skin tissue, and a bunch of bone cells make up bone tissue.
Bone tissue.
Yeah, so this is a picture right here of bone tissue. That's a bunch of these all put together. Now, when we have a bunch of tissues, those tissues all combine to form an organ. In the case of bone cells making bone tissue that combine to make the organ. A bone is an organ, right? So is your heart. So is your brain, your lungs. They're made up of different kind of tissues that combine to make them together. And then, of course, when we combine all the organs, we get an organ system, like the skeletal system. Now, guys, remember this: life, domain, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. I gave you that mnemonic to remember them. Dear King Philip cried, oh, for goodness sake. If you can remember that little saying, you can remember the order that these come in. Dear is domain. K is kingdom. King is kingdom. Philip would be phylum. Cried is class. Oh, like, oh, for goodness sake. Oh is order. For is family. Goodness is genus. And then sake is species. So that's a way that you can help to remember those. Now, let's take a look at the kingdoms right now. Let me get my pointer on here. So let's take a look at the kingdoms right here. This is all 6 of them. There are 6 kingdoms of living things. 4 of them are eukaryotes, and 2 of them are prokaryotes. What does eukaryote mean? What's a eukaryote? These are 2 important words to remember. The difference between a eukaryote and a prokaryote. Abigail.
Eukaryote living?
Eukaryote what?
Is living?
Well, they're all living. Bacteria is living. Archaea are living. They're all living. So you're right, but that doesn't make it different. What does a eukaryote have that a prokaryote doesn't? Their cells are a little bit different from one another. So the cells of a eukaryote have a nucleus.
Oh,
Yeah, go ahead, Bastian.
so like bacteria and archaea aren't like, or more like germs and stuff like that, like more like smaller, and then animalia is like animals, fungi, plants, like stuff like that.
Yep, those are the kingdoms that they are. So the kingdoms of life that are eukaryotes are ones that have cells that have a nucleus inside, and they have those membrane-bound organelles inside them. Prokaryotes don't. Now, they all have DNA. They have to. So they all have the genetic code in order to make more of themselves. But in a bacteria and in an archaea, they're not inside a nucleus. That DNA is just loose in the cell. It's not inside the nucleus. So prokaryotes don't have a nucleus or membrane-bound organelles. Eukaryotes do. So members of the eukaryotes that are in the kingdom Plantae, Protista, fungi, and Animalia, we're going to focus on Animalia for now. We'll get to fungi and protists this semester, and then next semester we'll talk about plants as well. We'll also discuss bacteria and archaea at the very end of this semester. Now, all the members of kingdom Animalia are multicellular. What does that mean? Miles?
More than one cell.
More than one cell, exactly. So all the members of kingdom Animalia and all the members of kingdom Plantae have more than one cell in their body. They're made up of multiple cells. Fungi and protists have some that are unicellular, meaning one cell, and some that are multi, and then all bacteria and all archaea are just one cell. You can see that right here. You can see the picture right there. So unicellular means they're just one cell. That doesn't necessarily make them really simple. Remember, one cell does all the jobs. We're in a multicellular being. We've got a bunch of different cells doing a bunch of different jobs. All right, so again, animals are in the kingdom Animalia. And we start our study of kingdom Animalia with invertebrates. As we said, these are ones that have no backbones. So because there's so many of them, it's going to take 3 weeks for us to learn about them all. So this week, we're going to learn about the 3 simplest kinds of animals: sponges, cnidarians, and worms. So I want to introduce all of those to you today so you know what they are. First, sponges. Now, it might surprise you to find out that sponges are animals. A lot of people think they're plants because they kind of look like a plant, but they're not. They have all those characteristics that we talked about. They have to eat other organic matter. If they were a plant, they wouldn't have to do that because plants perform photosynthesis to make their own food. Animals can't do that. Sponges are not able to make their own food. They have to eat it. Now, they are invertebrates. They don't have a backbone. One thing that's really unique about sponges is they don't have any symmetry. So remember last week or the week before, we talked about symmetry. We said there are really 3 kinds of symmetry. There's bilateral, where you can draw one line right down the middle and they're mirror images on both sides. So people have bilateral symmetry. Dogs have bilateral symmetry. Birds, butterflies, anything that you can draw one line down has bilateral symmetry. Then there's animals that have radial symmetry. Those are usually the roundish ones, like think of a starfish. We call them sea stars because they're not fish, but a sea star, or a sea cucumber, or a sand dollar, things that are roundish like that. Those are ones that have, you can, many different directions that you can divide them and have a mirror image. And then there's ones that there's nowhere. There's no place that you can draw a line and it's the same on both sides. That's called having no symmetry or asymmetry. Sponges also don't have any tissues. Remember back on the picture that we were looking at back here, we said that there are tissues that are made up of groups of cells. Well, the cells of a sponge don't come together to make tissues. They work individually. They're individual different kinds of cells. And because they don't have any tissues, they can't have any organs either. Now, I want you to watch this video here of what a sponge looks like. Take a look first at, this sponge. Basically, you can see it's hollow. It's got this hollow bag. There's openings on the sides right in here. You can see them from the inside a lot better. And then there's this very large opening at the top. There are also a lot of tiny spikes around this. They give it support. They protect it a little bit. And then it has some cells inside it that have little whip-like strings on it that beat in order to bring food and water into this inside cavity. So they beat to pull water in from the outside, and then they filter the water and get the food from the water. Now, let's watch this video and see one really unique property that sponges have. This makes them unique.
Unlike most of our cells, those of sponges retain a special freedom. They can continuously reinvent themselves, performing some truly miraculous feats. If a sponge is passed through a sieve, its cells are separated. But somehow the cells still recognize each other. Over several hours, they begin to come together, building many new sponges. No other plant or animal can resurrect itself this way.
So that's pretty cool. If you take all the individual cells apart, as long as they're near one another, they'll join back together and make new sponges. Now, I love this video. In this one, we're going to become a little tiny particle in the water, and we're going to get pulled through the canals of the sponge. There's going to be other microscopic organisms right there with us. And along the way, we're going to learn that sponge cells catch food and they make these spicules. Those are the long little sticks in there. Now, he's going to talk about being swept into the beating heart. Keep in mind, there are no organs. So there isn't an actual heart, but those whip-like structures called flagellae that bring water in, that's what he refers to as the heart. Now, don't worry about the terms that are in this video for now. Just sit back and enjoy riding through a sponge.
Drifting along with countless single-celled organisms, we feel the tug of a current. In the wonderland within, this sponge's cells all work for the common good, but they do it in wildly different ways. As the current draws us on, we pass sponge cells that are making new spicules. The walls themselves are treacherous. They can simply engulf their unfortunate prey. As we are drawn through ever narrower passages, the current slows until we burst into one of the sponge's millions of tiny beating hearts. These are choanocytes, cells whose whip-like flagellae powers the pump. The flow quickens again as it whisks us away through the labyrinth of canals that lead out into the sponge's central cavity. What once seemed barely alive is actually a living animal, more complex than we could have imagined.
Okay, a couple of you guys are saying that it's kind of laggy. I have some more videos. So sometimes when there's a lot of students in a class, it will be a little bit laggy because of all the cameras. So we're going to try something with the next video. I'll try having you all turn your camera off while you watch the video and then turn it back on when the video is done. So we'll give that a try the next time. All right, so that's it for sponges. You'll learn about them in your reading this week. The next, when we're moving up from the simplest kind of animal, a sponge is the simplest kind of animal. The next most complicated is called a cnidarian. You can see in that there's a C at the beginning of that word. We don't pronounce the C. It's not cnidarian, just plain cnidarian. Now, cnidarians, they're invertebrates. They don't have a backbone. They use stinging cells. There's a special name for those stinging cells called nematocyst. They use those stinging cells both to capture food and to defend themselves against predators. So, any idea what an example of a cnidarian is? You think of an animal that uses stinging cells. Mila.
A jellyfish.
Yeah, jellyfish. Jellyfish is an excellent example of that. So you can see it right there. If it has stinging cells, it's a cnidarian. Now, this is not the same as the stinger on a bee. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about these special stinging cells. They work a little bit like a spear on a cord. So they shoot out and they inject venom into the prey or the predator if they're trying to defend themselves. So jellyfish are a good example. There's other examples of them besides just jellyfish. There are corals. You can see the corals right here in the picture. Corals are little tiny animals. Did you know that a coral reef is made of animals? They're little tiny animals that are about the size of a pencil eraser. So one of those erasers on the end of your pencil. So that I'll talk about that in a minute, Jaslyn. But yes, there are ones that we think haven't ever died. That's kind of a difficult question to answer. There are stingrays. Stingrays are not cnidarians. I just had the question, is a stingray. So stingrays are a kind of a fish. We'll get to them next week. So we can see here, we've got corals, we've got hydras, we've got sea anemones. These are anemones right here. This is called a sea fan. We've got a Portuguese man of war. These are called sea pens. Now this video, watch this part right here. This shows a sea pen reacting to a predator. So you'll see the predator, it's a little yellow structure, a little yellow animal that will come in this way and it will touch these sea pens. And you can see that they expel water from their body in order to be able to sink into the sea floor. So let's watch this. It'll happen fast, there it is.
The speeded up footage shows how over 4 hours, some of the sea pens gradually deflate and bury themselves in the seabed. It's thought this behavior might protect sea pens from predators. And this may be the first time that evidence has been captured to confirm it. Close examination of the time-lapse clip shows a yellow sea slug, a sea pen predator, enter the scene and make contact with some of them. Each sea pen it touches withdraws into the sediment.
Pretty interesting. Now take a look at this one. This is a cnidarian, but it's not just one animal. This is called Portuguese man of war, and it's actually a colony of different kinds of cnidarians. There's 4 different kinds of individual specialized cnidarians that work together as one. That's pretty interesting. And all right, we're going to watch this one now. So I want you guys all to turn your cameras off, and then I'll tell you to turn them back on when the video is over. Let's see if that helps. Let me know if the lagginess helps.
This astounding creature known as Praia is a combination of the 2 basic cnidarian shapes. The pulsing, bell-shaped medusa and the stalk-like polyp with trailing tentacles. Spanning up to 120 feet, Praia is the longest predator in the world, longer even than a blue whale. Stinging tentacles sweep through the water like a massive fishing net. As with other cnidarians, its tentacles are lined with millions of nematocysts for capturing and killing prey. Deeper, the crew spots a Colobonema, a jellyfish with a surprising defense. When startled, it detaches its tentacles, leaving them behind as decoys to distract would-be attackers. To some, these cnidarians appear fantastic, surprising, even otherworldly. But in this realm, they are the dominant animals.
I think jellyfish are pretty cool. And yeah, longer than a blue whale. That is kind of amazing, isn't it? All right, turn your cameras back on. Seems like that helped for some of you, but not all of you. We won't have a whole lot of videos. I've got more today than we usually have. They do look like aliens. They look like they came down from outer space and took residence in our oceans, but they're not. Yeah, that would be pretty scary, Micah. Most animals can't do that. There are a few, though, that can lose a part of their body in order to scare off the would-be predator, not scare off, but distract the would-be predators. Okay, so we have the sponges. They're the simplest kind of animal. No symmetry. They are, they have no tissues, no organs. And then the next most complex that we have are the cnidarians. What kind of symmetry do these cnidarians have? Remember, there's three kinds: bilateral, radial, or none. What kind does a jellyfish or an anemone have? Abigail?
Radio.
Yes, they have radial symmetry. Yeah, good guys, radial symmetry. Okay, now we're going to go into a little bit more complex. Now there's 3 different phyla of worms. So remember back when we were talking about this picture right here, and we said kingdom, phylum. Phylum is the group. The one phylum is called a phyla. So when we divide up kingdoms into the different phylums of life, 3 of them are worms. That's pretty amazing, isn't it? The 3 of them are worms. Those 3 phyla are flatworms, roundworms, segmented worms. Why do you think flatworms are called flatworms? Yeah, because they're flat. You're right. They are flat. Now, of course, all of these have a more formal term. Flatworms are called platyhelminths. We'll talk about that when we get into talking more about them. But I remember that because flat and plat rhyme. Platyhelminths are flatworms. Roundworms, of course, are round. Segmented worms, like the ones in the picture here, they have segments. So you can see those individual segments. Think like an earthworm. An earthworm is a segmented worm. So let's look at flatworms. Look how pretty some of those are. They're often parasites. Anybody know what I mean when I say parasite? You know the term though, right? Paul? Yeah, you're still muted, Paul. I think you can unmute by hitting the space bar on your keyboard. Oh, we still can't hear you though. Your microphone might not be working. All right, we're gonna have to move
Check your
on.
microphone settings. Check your
Yeah.
microphone settings.
Yeah, it could be the mic. Maybe see if you can get it working for next time. So, Abigail, what is a parasite?
People don't like them.
Your people do not like them. You're right about that. So what a parasite is an animal that lives in or on the body of another living thing and takes from it, in some way hurts it, does some damage to it. So most flatworms are parasites. Not all of them, though. Some of them are free living. They don't live in or on another organism. They just live on their own. Now, there's a kind of a flatworm called a tapeworm. That's a parasite. That's bad. Tapeworms can live inside the digestive system of another organism. So let's say, you know, a dog has a tapeworm inside it. The dog eats, but the dog doesn't get the food. The tapeworm gets the food. So now the dog becomes malnourished because the tapeworm is eating all of its food. So let's watch a video that shows some flatworms moving around. I think the way they move is kind of pretty. This is a tapeworm. So a couple of you guys said the bottom left was creepy. Yeah, that's a tapeworm. It is kind of creepy. So let's watch these move.
This animal is a flatworm. They may be among the most obscure animals on Earth. Scientists have described about 20,000 different species of flatworms so far, tenaciously surviving in almost every environment. On land, in the oceans, in freshwater ponds, and in the strangest habitat of all, inside the bodies of other animals.
So what's really interesting is that all animals, including people, have parasites that live inside them. You have some inside you right now, but your own body keeps them in check. It keeps them from causing any kind of harm at all. It's only when there get to be too many of them or there get to be some really bad ones. Some of them are really bad. The ones that generally live inside people aren't really bad unless they overgrow. So, we'll talk again more about that when we get to the digestive system of a person in the second semester. All right. So we talked about flatworms. They're flat. Roundworms, of course, are round. Roundworms are in a different category than the flatworms for another really important reason. They are the first animal that we've talked about so far that have a digestive system that's open on both ends. Sponges have one opening. Food comes in, food goes out, the same opening. Waste products go out. Cnidarians have one opening. Food goes in, waste goes out through the same opening. Even flatworms have just one opening. Roundworms have a tube. It's open on both ends. Food goes in one end and waste products come out the other end. That will be true of all the rest of the animals that we'll talk about. So that makes roundworms a little bit unique, that tube shape that they have. Now, in a segmented worms, I meant to say. So, roundworms. Yes, roundworms are different than the other ones because they are a tube. So next, after we have roundworms, now we go to segmented worms. We tend to think of an earthworm as being a segmented worm, but there's more. You can see all of these have segments in them, so they are a little bit different. Now, in some of these, there's an organ in every single segment, and in others, there are only organs in some segments of them. So that's it for what we're going to be learning about this week. You're going to learn about sponges. You're going to learn about cnidarians. Remember, we don't say the C, it's silent. And we're going to learn about the 3 different phyla of worms: flatworms, roundworms, and segmented worms. Anybody have any questions about those? Yes, that is a centipede. All right, we are going to do a Kahoot now. So get your phones out or your device, whatever you want to do the Kahoot on. So this is going to be a little review of what we've done so far. There's not much from what we talked about today, but it's going to be a review from the last couple of weeks. All right, I'll get you your code here in just a second. Okay, so www.kahoot.it. And remember that you can always scan this QR code. So here comes your game pin, 738294. 738294. There it is. I just sent it to you. If you want to copy and paste, you can. I'm pretty sure if you use the QR scanner, it takes you right here and you don't have to put the code in. Why not, Audrey? What's it doing? Oh, yeah. Some of your parents may have blockers on your computers. If that's the case, you might want to talk to them and ask them to unblock this one. In the meantime, you can just play along by watching. Yeah, today it would be too late. You won't have time. So next time, for class next week, just make sure that you have that done. Today, you can just observe. You can watch. Okay, everybody in? Once again, this pin will always be at the bottom. You can come in if you need to, but we need to get started. So let's, oh, there we go. All right, here we go. 3, 2, 1, begin. Animal anatomy and behavior. The organism pictured is radially, bilaterally, or asymmetrical. It is bilaterally symmetrical. So let's go over what we mean about that again, because about half of you guys got that one wrong. Radially, think about the wheel of a bicycle or a tire, how it's round, and there's anywhere that you can draw a line there all the way around, and it looks the same on both sides, mirror images of each other. That's radial. Bilateral is like we are. We are bilaterally symmetrical. You could draw a line right down the middle of us. We're roughly symmetrical on both sides. And then asymmetrical, only sponges are asymmetrical. They're the only animal that's asymmetrical. So unless it's a picture of a sponge, it's not going to be asymmetrical. That means they don't have any place that you can draw a line and be able to see them. Okay, let's look at the next one now. So Jaslyn got there first. Bimpos, not sure who that is, but Bimpos is in second and Paul is in third. Here we go. This organism is kind of symmetry. That is radially symmetrical. Radially symmetrical. So remember what bilateral is. Bilateral is one line. There's only one place. I can't like draw a line this way and have me be the same on both sides. Only right here is the only place that I can do that. But look at this sea star. I could draw a line here and it's about the same. I could draw a line here and it's about the same on both sides. From any of these arms, I could draw a line straight through and it would be just about the same. Think the organisms that are more or less roundish in shape are the ones that have radial symmetry. All right. Question 3. Isn't he cute? This is bilaterally symmetrical. All right. I want to try to explain this again because I'm still seeing about half of you guys getting it wrong. This is bilaterally symmetrical because there's one line. In general, things that have a face or a head are going to have bilateral symmetry because you can draw a line right down the middle of their face. Think a sea star doesn't have a face. An anemone doesn't have a face. A jellyfish doesn't have a face. Those have radial symmetry, and sponges are the only ones that are asymmetrical. All right. Question 4. All right, that is asymmetrical. So take a look at this sponge. There's nowhere that we can draw a line down this sponge and have it be about the same on both sides. Now we could cut it in half and there's going to be these tubules on both sides, but they're not identical to one another. There is no symmetry in a sponge. It is asymmetrical. All right, moving on from symmetry. Let's see, Jaslyn is in the lead. Paul and Evie not far behind. Question 5. I guess we're not moving on from symmetry. I forgot about this one. So it's mostly round. Keep in mind what that means. Mostly round. That is radially symmetrical. Radially symmetrical. Again, it's kind of round. Anywhere along here, you can draw a line and it will be roughly the same on both sides. All right. Question 6. In this type of skeleton, there are bones inside the body. Endoskeleton. Very good. Endo means in. So an endoskeleton is inside the body. Everybody got that one. In this type, there's a shell outside the body. That is an exoskeleton. You got it. All right. Guess what's next? In this type, there's water pressure in tubes inside the body. That is hydrostatic skeleton. All right, everybody's got that one. Awesome. Here we go. The arrangement of organisms into categories based on their characteristics is called classification. That is called classification. All right. Paul moves into the lead, followed by Jaslyn and Abigail. What do we call the branch of biology that deals with classification? It is called taxonomy. Taxonomy. All right. Let's see here. Abigail zooms into the lead. Question 11. The genus and species names used to name organisms are referred to as what? Binomial nomenclature. Good. So binomial means two name. So genus and species are two names for an organism. Binomial, two name, and then nomenclature means naming. So basically, binomial nomenclature means two name naming. And that's what we use for most animals. We give them a genus and species name, all of them, not most, all. All right, Paul goes into the lead. Daniel has a streak with 7 correct answers in a row. 12. In the wild, baby lions learn to hunt by watching their parents hunt. This is an example of imprinting. This is an example of imprinting because they learn by watching. All right, question 13. When you walk up to a fish tank, the fish often swim to the top and look at you. This is an example of this is classical conditioning. So those fish become conditioned. Your presence usually means food. So they become conditioned to you. All right. Evie moves on to the board. Question 14. Animals that feed in or on the living bodies of other organisms. Parasites. Parasites. Very good. Very good. All right. Nothing changed there. All right. Now you put these in order. Touch first the one that goes first. Using that little mnemonic I taught you should be helpful. Kingdom, phylum, class, order. King Philip cried, "Oh." All right. Now the next one, we're going to do the next 4, but it's going to start with order. I'll give you that one. So start with order and then what? Try to answer quickly. We're about out of time. Order, family, genus, species. King Philip cried, "Oh, for goodness sake." All right, let's see if we can get 1 or 2 more here. Animals that eat only plants are called herbivores. Animals that eat only animals are called carnivores. And animals that eat both are called what? This will be our last question. They are called omnivores. Well done. All right, I'm going to end the game and we will see our podium. So in third place, Abigail. In second place, Jaslyn. And in first place, Paul. All right, well done. Terrific job, everybody. Evie and Lyd are our runners up today. All right, great job. Thanks for participating in class. Anybody have any questions? All right, have fun learning about sponges, cnidarians, and worms this week. See you next time.
Oh, thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.